Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Creatively Crafted Life. My name is Melanie, and joining me today in the craft room is Nikki from Nikki's Scrapbooking Adventures. Hi, Nikki.
Hey, Melanie. Okay, we need to address. I did chop my hair off.
I see that. It
That's
looks
all we need to talk
impressive.
about. Thanks.
Right in time for summer, too.
Yes, exactly. I needed to get my hair off my face, off the back of my necks, and not wearing ponytails all the time.
Yeah, yeah, it looks great. Well, you probably can't tell, but I actually got about 3 inches chopped off of mine, too. So I guess we're on the same wavelength here.
Yeah, I felt like people were going to be kind of shocked because this is a big change.
It definitely is a big change, but looks super cute.
Thanks.
So we are actually going to branch into a topic that I think both of us maybe struggle a little bit with. I mean, I may be speaking on your behalf, but we're going to talk about journaling. And for myself, I mean, I would say I'm a very bare bones basic journaler when it comes to scrapbooking.
Me too. I do try to journal on a lot of my layouts, but I also use the titles as my journaling sometimes, and then I don't have to journal.
Yeah, that's very bare bones. That's for sure. But I mean, and to be fair, there are certain layouts that warrant more journaling than others, right? Sometimes you just have a cute picture and that's all it is. And you can scrapbook it just for the cute picture that it is. There doesn't necessarily have to be any hidden story behind it. But I have found that in recent months, I've been thinking more about how do you tell more of the story. And I'm hoping that our conversation today will help me become a little bit better journaler, or at least put me on the right path.
Right. I was actually looking at some of those layouts that only had a title, and I was like, man, if I wasn't me looking at this layout, I don't know that my audience would know what this story is about.
Right, right. And that, I guess that's part of it, right? You have to remember that at some point someone may be looking at your layouts other than you, and what do you want them to know about this layout?
So, in general, what percentage of the time do you think you journal on your layouts?
I would say I put some type of journaling on every layout. It
Okay.
may only be a sentence or two, but there's usually at least something. The only time I probably wouldn't is if it's something like a picture of my nephew or niece that I just like, and there's really nothing specific about the photo event wise, then I may not journal anything other than their name and their date. That being said, I think I should be using those opportunities to tell more about my relationship with them or what I wish and hope for them so that that at least can be conveyed in those layouts. At least that's what I'm thinking about.
I like that idea. I was just looking at a couple layouts. I do the same thing. I just put, the name and the age because everybody, that's the first question, right? Who is that and how old were they? So
Right.
I try to put that on there. And then the date, of course. That is like one of my top three things that I do on my layout is the date.
Yeah, I'm pretty good about the date. I think because it frustrates me not knowing when something is. Plus, I also tend to store my layouts chronologically, so it makes it easier to put them back or put them into albums when I'm finished.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we both journal a lot. I mean, I think I probably journal probably like 70% of the time. That 30% is usually if it's the title that tells the story, or if it's just like a random photo that I don't have a story with. So we both journal, but why do you journal? Do you have a specific reason that you journal?
So I guess that kind of goes back to why I scrapbook in the first place. I scrapbook obviously for the artistic, creative element of it, but subconsciously, or maybe now consciously that I've thought about it, in the back of my mind, I have always thought that I would be using, or my scrapbooks would be used at a time in my life when I struggled with something, let's say like Alzheimer's. I know that sounds a little bit depressing, to think that's a motivator, but to be honest, I don't want to forget my life, and not having a family. I mean, obviously, I have siblings and that kind of stuff, but not an immediate family. That, I sometimes think, well, who would be able to share those memories with me? Because a lot of times they aren't shared with a core group of individuals, their individual friends here and there, or individual family members. And so, when I do get older and perhaps my memory starts to fade, how can those memories be relived? I don't know. I don't know if that even makes any sense, but I think there was an element of that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Alzheimer's actually does run in the family. So it is a very real possibility. And my memory is not very good. So, for example, I lived through 9/11. Everybody asks me what I was doing during that time because it was such a significant event, right? But I don't remember. The only thing I remember is that my parents were in Alaska on a cruise and they couldn't get home because all the flights shut down. That's the only thing I remember. And that's not even my memory. That was them telling me what had happened. I was looking back and I did journal about when we first discovered about COVID. And I was like, wow, I'm so glad that I have this so I can actually relive that memory and have it in my brain.
Right, right. So yeah, so that's basically, I think, why I journal. I don't expect that my books are going to be passed on, obviously, because I don't have any children. I suspect that certain of the books will be distributed. So, for instance, perhaps some of the more historical family type layouts that I do, that perhaps one of my siblings' kids would be interested in, or any of the joint things that I do with my extended family, perhaps there will be somebody that will want those. But for instance, like I just was on a work trip to the Netherlands, which I'll document. Nobody's going to care about that, right? Like those layouts will just be layouts purely for me. And, they won't live on. I fully expect that they won't live on, past my lifetime.
Do you have like a specific style? Do you journal a certain way, have a certain perspective, or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm usually a who, what, when, where, sometimes why. That doesn't mean that that's what I would like it to be. I would like to have a little bit of more emotional connection with my journaling, maybe express more of the moment, what I was feeling in the moment. The problem I find is that I am a severely delayed scrapbooker, meaning I almost never scrapbook current photos. So by the time I get around to scrapbooking, a lot of times that's all that I remember is the who, what, where, when, sometimes why. And I don't always remember the feelings that were felt at that particular moment. The only time I would say that I am good about documenting in the moment is when I travel. And not always when I travel, but when I do some pretty significant trips, I have always kept a daily journal, and they're so fun to go back and read because, you can actually feel yourself in that place again. Because I was a little bit more expressive with my emotions and feelings, it changes your experience in revisiting those moments.
Mm-hmm. For me, I scrapbook my son a lot, and I am pretty current. Like 2023, 2024 is usually what I'm scrapbooking. But I write it as I'm talking to him. So I say, you were playing on the slide today, or you had a blast, playing with water balloons, or whatever he was doing in that layout. So a lot of mine is in second person, you.
Which makes sense. And I think that's appropriate when you're documenting his life, because really it is, at the end of the day, I would expect a gift that you're giving him, your perspective of his life as he grew up. And I think that's a wonderful gift. So it makes sense that you would be talking in that second person voice.
Yep. And then usually it's like the everyday. You're just talking about like who, what, where, when. That's kind of what I do as well. If it's emotional, it'll probably go into like my own scrapbook because I'm talking about something that is emotional. Like I was talking about like the COVID-19 thing. That was a little bit more emotional. You could really kind of hear the shock in my voice when I was writing. And it was like a full 8.5 by 11 piece of paper.
Oh, wow. That's something you wrote in the moment then?
It was probably a year later.
Okay. That's still, I mean, considering it spanned for a couple of years, that's pretty good. That's pretty current.
Especially because during that time, my son had passed away. So
Right.
like I had to kind of pause, not really think about that time, grieve, and then go back and do those stories.
Right. Right. And I could see how that, and then with the difficulties with your son as well, how those two almost collided with each other and changed or magnified the experience in a completely different way.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why I don't remember 9/11 is because I was just an elementary schooler, and in school you don't watch the news.
Yeah. Yeah, you wouldn't have fully realized the significance of it.
Right. Especially being in a small town in Iowa, that's so far away from New York.
Yeah. But we have that quite often. Like we just become desensitized to things that are outside our immediate environment. When you hear about, the wars overseas and stuff like that, like, yes, initially you're, you know, horrified or shocked or whatever. But as time goes on, it's almost like you become desensitized to that because it doesn't impact your day-to-day life. So yeah,
Mhm.
it makes sense.
We both journal on our layouts. Do you type or do you handwrite?
I mostly handwrite. And that's just because I'm too lazy to go to the computer and break my process. We've had this conversation before, right? Like when I'm in the zone, I'm like, if I could have everything on my desk that I need, that would be ideal, right? Like if I did not have to get up for anything, that would be perfect. And so generally speaking, I handwrite on my layouts. The only time that I don't is usually in my travel scrapbooks. Because I do journal in the moment, I will often retype that up because I have so much to say to condense it so that it'll fit on a layout. I also have on a couple big trips done a separate, like a smash journal. Do you remember those?
Yeah, where you like add tickets and like all the ephemera that you get from your trip.
Exactly. So I've done that while on the trip, and I don't actually transfer that journaling over into my main scrapbook. I just leave it as an addendum or a supplement to it. And then I just do the bare bones journaling on my scrapbook layouts again because I've already documented it. It doesn't make sense to redo it all. And it's in a cool format. So I don't want to get rid of the journal either, right? But if I've just done, basic scratching, while I've in a little pocketbook or something while I'm journaling while I'm traveling, I will type that up and then put that in my layout. I do have an old manual typewriter that I love. I specifically went searching for one, and I have used that for journaling, and I love using that to do the strip
Yeah.
journaling. I have done that fairly often. My typing's not great.
My gosh,
So
those keys are like at different levels and everything. Like I've got nails on right now. There's no way that I would be able to use a typewriter. I
well,
can
and
barely
it's like
type on my keyboard.
yeah, if you do make a mistake, it's not like I don't have the proper corrective tape or whatever to fix it. But I've learned to just embrace it. If I make a mistake, I can either type it over if it really bothers me, or I just live with it. And I'm like, that's part of the character of that type of journaling. But mostly I would say I handwrite just again because I'm too lazy to get up and do something different.
Yeah. Now, would you say your writing is like proper English? I don't know. I was looking back and I was like, man, I went from past tense to present tense to past tense.
Oh yeah, I don't worry about that. I mean, I think my writing is generally pretty good. Just generally speaking, I have always been a decent writer, like in school and stuff like that, and that's carried over. But I don't worry about if I've switched um, tenses or even if I've switched perspectives. It's journaling to me. Part of the fun of that is that it's just an expression of you as if you were talking to someone. And I don't think about that when I'm talking to you, for instance, right? It's
Mhm.
just like I'm having a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a good question to ask our viewers too. Do you guys journal? Why do you journal? Do you have a specific type? Do you handwrite? Do you type? I know some people are like, I'm type all the time. And I'm like, I am just like you. I handwrite everything and I write it in capitals so you can read it.
Very good point. I never thought about that. My writing is, what can I say? I can have really good
Sloppy.
penmanship.
This is my penmanship if it's not capitals, and you cannot
Okay.
hardly read it.
Don't beat yourself up too bad. That's not so bad. My penmanship can be really good if I try. My thing is I'm always, so what you see in my scrapbook is pretty much my everyday writing, which I think is kind of cool too.
Yes, I do. It's fun looking at other people's styles of handwriting. Every once in a while, I'll do lowercase and capital if it's for my scrapbook. But if it's for my son's, then it's all capital so that he can read it.
Oh, that's a good idea. Never thought of doing all caps.
Yeah,
Very good.
you take your time. Each letter is formed very specifically, so that's why I do it.
So I have a question for you. Do you journal before or after you do the layout?
Usually I journal after, but while I'm doing the layout, I'm thinking about the story. So I'm always picking out elements, that emphasize the story that I'm going to write. So then that's also why sometimes just the title is fine. I don't need to journal because I've picked out all the elements to emphasize the story.
Right. So have you ever had a circumstance where your story was longer than the space you've allotted?
That's usually when I type, if I have to.
Okay, just to condense it.
Yep. Because I try to keep my journaling to like 3 to 5 lines because the odd number or whatever is supposed to be aesthetically pleasing. So if it gets longer than like 5 lines and it's like spread across the page, then I'll go and type it.
Right. Now, do you find you tend to journal in a block kind of format? I think that's what.
Yes, let's talk about formats. So there's a couple different formats that I'm aware of, right? You've got hidden journaling. You've got the strips, which is very popular with Allison Davis. You got blocks. You can put them in shapes. So I usually do blocks because I have scrap paper that's white, and I try to just use my scrap paper.
So do you always journal on something then and then add it to your layout, or do you ever journal directly on your layout?
It's probably 90% of the time on a block or a strip and then onto the layout. And 10% of the time is just directly on the layout.
Okay. And probably the opposite. I probably
really?
almost always, if I'm not typing it up, obviously, I'm almost always just writing it directly and tucked into some spot somewhere.
Yeah. So the one reason is because I have scraps that are like right above my head right here. And so I can easily pull it out. The second reason I write on something else is because if I make a mistake, I can easily replace it.
Yeah.
The third reason is if it's written on a block, I can move it around my layout to find the perfect spot.
Yeah. No, it totally makes sense. It's interesting. I also think it's a good idea to write it on a block if you write in advance, right? So if you do your journaling first, then you can treat it as an element on your page, like you've indicated, move it around along with your photos to find the perfect spot for it. The other way that I kind of incorporated, I don't know that I want to call it a style, but I will use pamphlets and brochures as part of my layout to document a lot of the details that I maybe want to retain about, let's say, a place I've been, for instance. And rather than me type up the facts about, this castle was built in 1555, if I've got a little blurb from a brochure or whatever, I will use that as a supplement to the journaling.
Yep. I've done that. Well, so you're talking about your traveler's notebooks. I've only really documented one big trip, and that was to Memphis to see my brother. And I did like a little mini album. And I journaled every day, and I kept the pamphlets. And inside this 8x8 album, there's a pocket that actually holds my traveling notebook, which had the prices of everything. It had everything that I planned to do in the schedule, and then also my journaling. So I kept an entire notebook that trip.
Yeah, I guess that brings up another point that different events may warrant different types of journaling. So a big trip, for instance, you may be interested in journaling all the bits and pieces of it, right? Like how much did it cost? How long were you on the road? How many miles did you drive? That kind of thing. Whereas in your everyday, some of those things I think should be documented. Like how cool is it to, document the price of gas from 4 years ago versus the price of gas now, right?
Now you're just gonna make me jealous.
Exactly. I actually did take a photo of one of the gas station signs during COVID because the price had dropped so significant. And I have one afterwards when it jumped up sky high. And I was thinking of doing some sort of comparative layout about how quickly things can change.
I did that with the price of eggs, when there was that chicken issue where they didn't have hardly any eggs and the prices skyrocketed.
I think you can Google, a particular year, and quite often that people will have done up a little collage of different facts about that year. And some of the things that they put in there are things like the price of eggs and the price of a house and that kind of stuff. And I think that's kind of a cool thing to incorporate somewhere at some point in your documenting, but not necessary with computers. You can always go and look it up. But I think, if you do something like that, also add journaling about how has that impacted your life, especially if we think about right now with the rising costs of everything and inflation. How has that impacted your life, and what have you had to make? What kind of changes have you had to make in order to still live comfortably?
It's so expensive right now.
Well, yeah, exactly. It is very expensive, and it's a little bit crazy. We've got some really deep topics that we're brushing on here.
Yeah, sorry, guys. Okay. So we kind of already talked about my last question. What kind of format do you use? Do you write directly on the page, journaling blocks, strips, caps, all that kind of stuff? I think we've kind of covered everything.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few other things that follow under types and styles. I don't know that we talked about all the styles, did we?
No, but we'll talk about, so the plan for Wednesday's call is to kind of go over the styles of scrapbooking, journaling, like everyday comparison, lists, creative writing, all that kind of stuff. And I'll actually give you some examples of my layouts of how I used all those different styles.
Well, that will be exciting. I'm sure everybody's going to be as interested as me. I, however, am taking the cheater's way out, or the lazy way out, and leaving Nikki to lead on that conversation. So yes, you do definitely need to go and head over to her channel on Wednesday to see how we carry on with that conversation. So I have a question for you. So what tips could you give me, or that you can think of that you use, that would help me become a better journaler, to incorporate a little bit more emotion, and perhaps look at things maybe from a different perspective?
That's a horrible question because we both write the same way and we don't put emotion in it. Oh my gosh.
I know. I put you on the spot. But I guess the question, I mean, obviously, those of you that are listening, we need help, right? So
right.
maybe the question is more directed to you. But I'm thinking, we're both reasonably intelligent people. So maybe I will phrase it. What is preventing you from moving beyond the basic journaling?
It's probably because I like the style of technical writing, which is very point blank. That's how my brain works. I took a creative writing class in high school and I failed it because that is not how my brain works. My teacher really wanted a lot of descriptive words and fluffy writing, and I cannot do that. The only time that I did that was if I was trying to make a page deadline.
So, and I think we're very similar. We both come from that logical, mathematical kind of linear thinking. So that totally makes sense. And I guess the question is, do you want to change your journaling, or are you happy with where you're at? I want to change mine because I think there can be more to it that I will appreciate later on, but that may not be for everyone. So the question is, are you wanting to change or improve upon your journaling? Or are you happy with where you're at?
I think I'm happy where I'm at. There is one style I want to try. And it is perspective journaling, where you put yourself in the perspective of your dog or your kid and you write from their perspective. I think that would
Yeah.
be a lot of fun. I can only imagine what my dog's thoughts would be about me.
That would be quite interesting. I don't know that I've ever done that.
Do you
So
have any animals that you would be able to write from their perspective?
I don't. I don't have any pets. I don't have any kids. I am a
You're a
spinster.
loner.
Live alone by myself. No, just kidding. I'm not kidding, but I'm
But
kidding.
at least you know exactly where the mayonnaise is in the refrigerator. You don't have to ask anybody where they heckin' put it.
Oh, well. So I do have a boyfriend. He comes over and he's super helpful. You know, like if my dishwasher's full, he'll empty it. The problem is that he puts things wherever he finds an empty spot. So even though I live by myself, I do still have to go and search for things. I've given up trying to keep serving spoons separate from like soup spoons because he thinks they're the same thing. I'm like, well, whatever, you know. I'd rather be appreciative of his help than to try and fix it. But um, I guess even if you live by yourself, you still have those issues.
Maybe you need to write a journaling about his perspective on putting the dishes away.
You know what? That would be kind of fun. Actually, it would be interesting to try and write some stuff from his perspective. I think that also would change or can be helpful in your relationship with a person if you kind of put yourself in their shoes. You know, be a little bit more sympathetic to the way they perceive things. Would be an interesting exercise for sure.
We're getting deep again, Melanie.
I know. Well, how can you not when you talk about journaling, right?
That's true.
When you go to start doing a layout, you said you basically do your journaling towards the end, but you're always thinking about it. Do you end up making notes for yourself either before you even start scrapbooking? So, for instance, like something you've gone to a big event or whatever, do you do any type of note keeping or tracking of that you can reference at a later date when you do scrapbook, or are you purely like just relying solely on your memory?
So a lot of it's the memory. The other part that I do is when I'm putting my photos away in my binder, I'll put a sticky note on the outside saying, this is what I'm thinking for this photo. Other things like if I have title ideas, last night I was doing one where I thought of a title right away and it was universal skill. And I wrote that down so that I didn't have to remember it while I was doing the layout.
Right. So you use primarily sticky notes then kind of as a way to keep track of stuff. That's a good option. I was looking at a couple of apps, trying to think of ways to digitize, you know, not so much digitize for the sake of digitizing, but because my phone is always with me, right? How can I use that as a tool to, you know, make those notes as they happen? Now, I don't have a little child, but for instance, if I had a child who said something quirky and I wanted to remember that quote, you know, how could I put it in a place where I would remember to access it? And so I was trying to think about some of the different apps that are out there. Obviously, one that comes to mind is OneNote, which you could easily use. It's a Microsoft, I think it's a Microsoft product, right? It's a Microsoft product.
It's part of the Office suite.
It acts like a notebook, if you really want to think of it, that you can have different sections that you could have for different topics. Also, the Project Life app, I think, would work pretty good for journaling in the moment. You can use their free app with their basic formats. And if you take a 3x4 card, you can type up your journaling in there and save it in the app. You don't necessarily have to ever print it, but if you want to, it would be pretty easy to translate that into a journaling block.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that's just happened recently, and I have not explored it, but I think when I upgraded my iPhone, there was a new journaling app that came up. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I left it on my phone, didn't explore it or anything. But when I was in the Netherlands and I had taken some pictures on a trip, it popped up at the end of the day and said, here's a journaling opportunity for you. and it said document your trip to Rotterdam, blah, 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 kind of it gave me almost a journaling prompt. So I'm going to explore that a little bit because I think that would be kind of fun to just maybe try and do some journaling periodically.
One thing that I've used in the past is ChatGPT. I'll describe the situation in my photo to try to help me come up with a title. But who says you can't write down your journaling there and ask it to make it more creative, a little bit more descriptive? I do that a lot when I'm doing my review for my work. I'll use ChatGPT to write everything for me. I'll put my accomplishments in and it'll spit it out for me.
Yeah. So for people that are maybe not as up to speed, ChatGPT is basically an artificial intelligent tool or an AI tool, they call it, that, you can ask questions of, but you can also, phrase things in such a way that it'll help you formulate a letter, or in your case, journaling for your layout. It's a pretty impressive tool, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it a lot. Although I stopped my subscription because I didn't use it as much as I probably should be. But I'll probably pick it back up in July when my review comes.
Yeah, cheat a little bit, right? No, you're just using the resources that are available. And I think
Exactly.
that's, if you don't feel comfortable expressing yourself with words, or that you want a more polished look to your journaling, that might be something you want to pursue. But I would also encourage you to not be too concerned about it being perfect, right? Like, almost journal like you would talk to a friend. And I think if you do it that way, I think it's going to be interpreted in that kind of manner, whoever your viewer is, or the person who's reading your journaling. And I think that's okay, because I think that also tells something of who you are, and the journaling in and of itself tells a story. Does that make sense?
It
Yeah.
gives your thoughts and ideas and experiences your voice.
Right. And it doesn't sound like something polished. I don't think scrapbooks have to be polished. I mean,
Oh, Lord have mercy. We do mixed media on there. There's no way it's going to be polished.
yeah, it doesn't have to look like a magazine layout. It doesn't have to, it just should be something that is just a piece of you. And if your grammar isn't quote unquote perfect, it doesn't matter. It's okay. It's all good.
I was famous for, I don't know, like 2 weeks in the news. And this guy from the news was reading over my John Henry's Journey thing online. He's like, wow, you have a really good, informative voice for journaling. And I was like, really? I never thought about ever being a journaler,
Yeah. And I think it's one of those things that is a skill. The more you do it, the better you become at it. So at first, if it seems difficult, at least this is what I'm telling myself, just do it more often and you'll get better. I thought of a few. I know I asked you what tips, so I'm going to give you some ideas of what I've come up with, of ways that I think I could improve on my journaling. First of all, I know I like to type it up, even if I handwrite it. So, and I'm thinking more specifically longer bits of journaling. So I'm not talking about the 4 or 5 sentences I do currently. Obviously, I do that just off the cuff and I write it in my scrapbook, and that's fine. But if I'm wanting to be more expressive and it's not coming natural to me, then perhaps I should try typing it up first and play around with it a little bit before I commit to putting it on a piece of paper or whatever. Yes, I know I could write it on a piece of paper, but then if I don't like it, or I just want to change the sentence order around, I have to rewrite it over and over again. Whereas if I type it up, it's a little bit easier to juggle it around. And then there's nothing that says I can't handwrite it afterwards, but at least it gives me the opportunity to play with it.
You could do that on your phone too. You don't have to print directly from your phone if you're just going to handwrite it again, but you can copy, paste everything you can on your phone too.
Right. And there's the again, if you've got an iPhone, you've got like the Notes app. You could document in there. The nice thing about using your phone is you can actually dictate it into the phone, so you can use the microphone on your phone to get it to record for you. So there's some ways that I think you can use the tools available to help with this practice stage. I also think it's a good idea to just do a brain dump. And that lends itself to this whole, typing it up. Is if you have a lot of emotions about something and you want to incorporate that in, maybe just let it all out, see what comes out, and then reorganize it in a way that'll make you happy. I also think that it's important, if you want to do this, at least in my case, to schedule time to allow for it. So that may mean before I start the layout that perhaps I actually try and come up with some journaling. So I be proactive about it instead of, oh, by the way, I need to add some journaling. I don't know if I'll do all of those things, but I think those are things that I could try and employ.
Yeah, I'm not thinking that hard about it. You're going a little deep there.
And it's probably indicative of where I am in my life at the moment. I'm finding myself being quite reflective. And maybe that's why we've hit some of these other topics, these more deeper topics. And I don't know what's triggered it. I mean, you could say my age, but I don't think I feel old enough to be all that concerned about it. But I don't know. It's just interesting. I've been really thinking I want to document some of my older photos, my childhood I haven't done. It's almost like that interests me more than the current. And that could be because the current's kind of boring. It's feeling very repetitive. I think maybe that's part of it.
Maybe you need an adventure.
Yeah. I just don't know where to fit it in. My life is just so like jung, 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 jung. It's like, where do you fit it in? And someone from the outside looking in would say, what do you mean your life is like, didn't you just say you were in the Netherlands? Yeah, I was, but that was a work trip. Like that's
right.
That's not fun. Like I managed to add some fun in it. So, I managed to do a little bit exploring, but it's not the same as taking a week and going somewhere and exploring or doing stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I'm in a very interesting stage of life where I'm just kind of like, I don't know, it's sure flying by, that's for sure. And I'm not bored. It's just very repetitive.
It sounds like you need to talk to your boyfriend about taking you on an adventure.
Yeah, I don't know.
You can come to campus. My door's always open.
Oh, well, that's nice. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know what the adventure is. I don't know. But anyways, that's where I'm at, is this kind of reflective, which again lends itself to more emotional type journaling. So maybe it's all part and parcel. And where I'm headed, I don't know. We'll see.
Well, do you have any other tips or tricks to tell everybody?
No, because I think we're going to talk about styles, right? Yeah. So ways to do journaling, which I can't wait to hear all the different ones that you've used. And I may have a few up my sleeve, but not a ton. Like I said, I'm pretty bare bones. So yes, for everybody, please be sure to check Nikki's video on Wednesday to catch that. And we are thinking about perhaps adding some journaling prompts to our sessions, maybe have a topic every other month on certain types of prompts, and then us taking away and actually working with those. I don't know. Viewers, what do you think? Is this something we should pursue? I'm excited about it. I don't know if Nikki is. Are you?
I'm excited because that'll push my boundaries. Yeah. I don't know that I'll end up doing any of it, but we'll see.
So we need encouragement from you all. So yeah. Leave a comment below if you think journaling prompts would be helpful, and if you really would like to see what we do with journaling prompts, because that may be the push we need to maybe tackle some different stories. I think that's really what I'm interested in about journaling prompts, is that it gets me out of the day-to-day and maybe gets me thinking about stories that aren't necessarily event driven, which is how I tend to be a scrapbooker, to look for patterns. Again, it's all this reflection, right? Like looking back and seeing patterns in your life. I do have a book that I bought in 2022, and maybe some of this will surface as part of these prompts, but it's called the Me Journal.
Okay.
And it's it's meant to be just filled out in the book, right? And they're quick little short. Some of them are just check boxes. Some of them are circles. Some of them are, little, you could write little paragraphs and stuff like that. But there's some things in here that I thought, that would be interesting to document in a scrapbook layout. Not all of these lend themselves to it, but there are some things in here that kind of touch on who you are as an individual, and yeah, I think they could be kind of fun to explore.
I think it would be great because then we'll have a direction to go instead of an event driven like you were talking about. I did the load challenge a couple times and they do a prompt and a technique challenge. So I got to choose what I wanted to do, but the prompts really made you reflect about what you were going to scrapbook about. I did several layouts that I'm very proud of because I took a different perspective.
Yeah, I think it would be fun. I think it would be fun. So yeah, be sure to leave a comment below and stay tuned for Wednesday's conversation. And until then, happy crafting, everybody.